The note was so small I almost missed it. A torn corner of a prescription pad, folded twice, pressed into my palm like a secret too heavy to speak aloud. The doctor's eyes never met mine, but his voice trembled when he whispered, "Run." I didn't know then that by the time the streetlights flickered on, my entire understanding of home would be gone. My name is Mara Ellison, a 34-year-old school counselor who lives in a quiet cul-de-sac on the east edge of town, the kind of place where porch lights glow warm and neighbors pretend they know each other. I had gone to the clinic that afternoon for something simple: migraines, exhaustion, the usual weight of life pressing harder than usual. Everything felt normal until the doctor's face changed, as if he had seen something behind me that I couldn't. That was when he slid the note into my hand and told me not to go home. I didn't know whether to believe him, but I also didn't know how to ignore fear that felt so real. The parking lot was nearly empty by the time I stepped outside. Just a thin row of streetlights humming above the asphalt, blinking the way tired eyes do when they're fighting sleep. One of them flickered so hard the shadows around me kept changing shape, stretching, shrinking, breathing. That was where I stopped. Right under that half-broken lamp, with the wind pushing at my coat and the note still folded in my hand like something dangerous. I hadn't opened it yet. I could still feel the doctor's fingers, cold, trembling, as he pressed it into my palm. "Don't go home," he whispered. "Run." I didn't know which part scared me more. I unfolded the paper slowly, the way you would unwrap something fragile, something you're not sure you want to see. The handwriting was sharp, pressed hard into the page, like he didn't have time to think. "Don't go home. Run." Nothing else. No explanation, no signature, not even punctuation, just urgency carved into a scrap of white. The wind cut across the parking lot like it had teeth. I tucked one hand deeper into my coat pocket and stood there staring at the note, hoping the words might change if I blinked enough times. But they didn't. They stayed exactly the same. Simple, blunt, impossible. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. It didn't make sense. An hour ago, I'd gone in for something small, a routine check. Tired eyes. Headaches. Nothing that should have made a doctor pull me aside, lock the office door, and tell me in a voice shaking at the edges, "Take this, and don't ask questions." My breath fogged in front of me, thin and shaky. The clinic behind me was quiet, its windows dark except for one light on the second floor that flickered like an uncertain heartbeat. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything, but the note in my hands felt too real. I tried calling him. My thumb hovered over his name longer than it should have. Dr. Hale. A man who usually moved through hallways like a calm breeze, unshakable, unhurried. The call rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. "Dr. Hale, hi, it's Mara. Can you call me back soon?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected, the kind of voice you hear in people standing at the edges of bad news. I ended the call and looked around. Every car in the lot was still, frozen under the pale glow of the lamps. Even the wind seemed to pause for a moment, holding its breath with me. The clinic's glass doors reflected my image back at me. A woman standing alone, clutching a note like it was evidence of something she wasn't ready to understand. I tried calling again. Voicemail. The same hollow click, the same sinking feeling. A part of me wanted to get in my car, drive home, and pretend this was nothing more than an overreaction, a strange moment, a tired doctor. But the note felt like a plea. My house wasn't far. Just 15 minutes away. Close enough that I could picture the kitchen light I probably forgot to turn off, the mug I'd left in the sink, the sweater on the back of the dining chair. But those images didn't comfort me. They made my stomach tighten, as if my home had suddenly become the last place I should be. The wind shifted, a sharp, sudden gust that lifted the edges of the note and tugged at my coat like it wanted me to move. I stepped back, one slow pace at first, then another. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, not from the clinic, not from the cars, but from the empty spaces, the dark corners where the light didn't reach. Fear does strange things. It makes every silence louder, every shadow deeper. It makes you question your own name if you stand still long enough. I pressed the note to my chest and closed my eyes, just breathing, just trying to steady the shaking inside me. Run. The word repeated itself in my mind like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Why would he write that? Why would he whisper it? Why would he look at me like he was already imagining the worst? I opened my eyes and scanned the parking lot again. Still empty, still quiet, still wrong. A car alarm far away chirped once, then went silent. Too quickly, like someone had shut it up. My skin prickled. For the first time that night, I believed him. I wasn't imagining anything. Something was off. Something was waiting. And suddenly, the distance between me and home felt like a line I wasn't sure I should cross. I took one step toward my car, then stopped. The note fluttered in my hand, the words catching the light in a way that made them feel even sharper. Don't go home. The broken street lamp flickered overhead, casting me in and out of shadow. My reflection in the car window looked like someone I barely recognized, tired, frightened, torn between reason and instinct. For a long moment, I just stood there, the quiet pressing closer, the cold settling deeper into my bones. Home wasn't far, but neither was danger. And as I finally opened the car door, I whispered the question that had been sitting in my throat since I left the clinic. What's waiting for me there? The night didn't answer. It only watched. I drove past my street the way you pass an old photograph in a drawer, slowly with a kind of aching familiarity you don't quite want to touch. The mailbox stood exactly where it always had. The hedge I trimmed last week still curved neatly around the corner like a well-behaved secret. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was wrong. And somehow, that felt like the biggest warning of all. The world looked calm, but calm can lie. And that night, as I kept driving past the place meant to make me feel safe, I realized I didn't trust the quiet anymore. The wheel felt loose beneath my hands. Not broken, just softer, like it wanted to follow a path of its own. I kept one hand tight around it anyway, the skin on my knuckles turning pale. The sky had settled into that deep navy blue that only shows up after 9 p.m., right before darkness decides to commit. The houses along my street glowed warm behind their curtains. Golden lamps, soft porch lights, the faint hum of televisions living lives I wasn't part of. Everything looked normal enough to be a postcard, and yet my pulse climbed higher every time I imagined turning left. Because I knew what waited at the end of that turn, or rather, what was supposed to wait. My house wasn't extraordinary. 2 bedrooms, uneven driveway, a front door that always stuck when it rained. But suddenly, the thought of pulling into that familiar driveway felt dangerous, like stepping back into a story I wasn't meant to finish yet. I circled the block once, pretending I needed time to think, then twice, pretending I wasn't scared. The truth was quieter. I didn't want to be right. I didn't want to find out what the doctor feared enough to write the word run. On the second pass, the street felt different, thinner, as if something was waiting for me to stop pretending. I slowed the car until it barely rolled, my eyes fixed on my house from half a block away. The windows stared back, blank, dark, too still. There's a kind of silence that feels natural, like when a neighborhood rests after dinner. And then there's the kind that feels practiced, staged, like a held breath. That silence lived in my windows. I leaned closer to the steering wheel, squinting at the front curtains. A shadow slid across the glass, thin, quick, almost apologetic. Too quick to study, too real to ignore. My first instinct was to tell myself it was headlights. A passing car, a tree moving in the breeze, except there was no breeze, and no cars. Just that one shadow moving inside a house I wasn't inside of. I parked along the curb with the engine running. My heartbeat pushed against my ribs like it wanted out. I lifted my phone to zoom in on the living room window, the camera trembling slightly between my fingers. And then it happened. A light snapped on. Not a soft glow, not a gradual flick, just a sudden burst. The living room lamp I always turned off before leaving for work. The same lamp I remembered distinctly unplugging that morning because the outlet had started to spark last week. It glowed bright and steady through the thin curtain. Someone had turned it on, or something. My throat tightened. I waited for movement, for a figure, for anything that might explain the light. But nothing happened. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Just a lamp burning in an empty room I'd left dark. Something inside me shifted. Not panic, not yet, but a kind of quiet dread that feels heavier than fear. The kind that makes you sit still, listening with your whole body. I watched the house the way I'd once watched thunderstorms as a child. Fascinated, but afraid to get too close. The curtain swayed slightly, even though the air outside was still and heavy. It was the kind of movement that didn't feel like fabric following a breeze, but like fabric disturbed by something behind it. I swallowed hard. My keys felt too loud in my hand. My breath fogged the windshield, making the house blur in and out of sight like a memory. "Maybe you left it on," I whispered to myself, but even my voice didn't buy the lie. I remembered unplugging it. I remembered bending behind the sofa, feeling the dust on my fingertips, thinking I needed to clean more often. Memories don't lie that easily. The street around me stayed painfully calm. A dog barked 3 houses down. A porch light flicked off at the corner. Someone laughed faintly from behind a closed window. All normal things. All normal sounds. But my house was performing. Quiet in a way that wasn't real, still in a way that wasn't natural, and the lamp, glowing in a room meant to be dark, felt like a signal I wasn't supposed to miss. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "If someone's inside," I whispered, "they're waiting for me." The thought pulled the air out of my lungs. I put the car in drive, but I didn't move. The lamplight glowed warm through the curtains, steady and patient, as though it knew I was watching. It didn't flicker. It didn't dim. It only waited. My house had never looked more familiar or more foreign. I let the car inch forward a few feet, then stopped again. My hands were shaking now, not from the cold, but from the quiet certainty blooming in the back of my mind. Something was inside, and it had no reason to turn on a light unless it wanted me to see it. I whispered into the empty car. Barely a breath, barely a voice. Who turned it on? And why? The street didn't answer, but the house did, with its silence. I parked 2 streets away, close enough to see the faint glow of my house through the branches, but far enough that it couldn't see me back. The engine clicked softly as it cooled, each metallic pop sounding like a tiny warning. The neighborhood was quiet in that heavy way, the kind that settles deep into your bones and makes you feel like you shouldn't move too quickly. I reached for my phone with fingers that didn't feel like mine. The clinic number was still on the screen from earlier. I pressed call, listened to the ringing, and felt something in me sink when no one answered. Again. The air inside the car felt warmer than outside, but somehow emptier too. Streetlights washed the road in a dull yellow haze, making the familiar neighborhood look like a place I hadn't lived in at all. My breath fogged the glass when I leaned forward, staring at the street sign I knew by heart. I tried calling the clinic one more time, 1 ring, 2, 3, then the same hollow click. Voicemail. I ended the call before the beep. My own reflection stared back at me in the darkened window. Tired eyes, tight mouth, the shape of a woman trying to hold her fear together with both hands. Something wasn't right. The doctor's trembling whisper replayed in my head like a scratch on a record. Don't go home. Run. I didn't run. I drove. I parked. I hesitated. Curiosity is a strange thing. It can feel as dangerous as a blade, sharp enough to cut through caution, sharp enough to make you search for answers even when you know it might hurt. I opened the browser on my phone and typed his name, Dr. Hale. The first result was the clinic's page. The appointment schedule showed nothing unusual. But then, another detail caught my eye, small but sure enough to make my throat tighten. He hadn't been scheduled to work that afternoon, at all. I stared at the schedule, the blue highlighted time slot stretching across the screen like a silent accusation. His name wasn't anywhere. Not for today. Not for the next few days either. It didn't make sense. He had been in the exam room wearing his coat, holding his clipboard, writing that note with a hand that trembled just once. I scrolled again. Still nothing. My hand shook as I dialed the clinic's front desk. Each ring scratched at my nerves. Then finally, a click. A voice. Drayton Family Clinic. How may I help you? It was the receptionist, a woman named Clara, who usually spoke with the perkiness of someone who loved her job a little too much. But tonight, her voice felt different, tighter, pulled in at the edges. Hi, it's Mara. I was seen earlier today by Dr. Hale and... She cut in too quickly. Oh, Dr. Hale left early. Family emergency. Her tone didn't match her words, too rehearsed, like she was reading a line someone had handed her 5 minutes before. But he saw me this afternoon, I said quietly. A pause. Longer than it should have been. No, he didn't, she said. And her voice wavered for the first time. He wasn't here after lunch. I felt something cold travel down my spine. Not fear, something deeper. The kind of chill that comes from realizing 2 stories don't add up, and someone is choosing theirs very carefully. I was definitely seen by him, I whispered, not sure if I wanted confirmation or denial. On the other end of the line, Clara's breathing changed, soft, unsteady, like someone scared of their own words. Mara, she said, lowering her voice the way people do when they don't want someone nearby to hear. He left early. I don't know what else to tell you. Her voice cracked on the last word. I could have ended the call there. I should have, but something pulled at me. That same sharp curiosity, or maybe dread trying to take shape. Clara, I said, before he left, did he look okay? Did he say anything strange? Silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that fills every corner of a conversation until it becomes its own presence. When she finally spoke, the words were quiet enough that I had to press the phone harder to my ear. He told me not to let anyone back to that room. What room? Another pause. Then she whispered, Mara. What did he say to you? I closed my eyes. The image of his shaking hand placing that note in mine flashed in the dark behind my eyelids. He told me, I breathed, not to go home. The line stayed open, but Clara said nothing. Not a word, not even a sound. Her silence chilled me more than the night air ever could, because it wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of someone realizing something terrible and wishing they didn't know it. Clara? I whispered. The only reply was a soft, careful exhale, like someone had put a hand over her mouth. Then the line disconnected. Just that. No goodbye. No explanation. The screen went dark, reflecting my face again, but now I looked different, as if the fear had settled into my features, carving out places it had been meaning to live. I set the phone down gently, my fingers numb. Somewhere between the clinic and my house, a truth had been hiding, and now it was starting to show itself. I looked toward the direction of my home, shadows pooling on the street like ink. What kind of emergency, I whispered into the empty car, makes a doctor tell a patient to run? The night didn't answer. but something in me already knew it would. The night had settled into that strange, heavy stillness, the kind that makes every sound feel borrowed, every breath too loud. I crouched behind my car, 2 streets away, watching my home through the thin branches of an old maple. Its leaves barely moved, like even the wind didn't want to disturb anything here. That's when I saw him. A man stepped onto my porch with the slow confidence of someone arriving exactly where he was meant to be. No hesitation, no curiosity, just purpose. The porch light flickered above him, throwing shadows across his face in quick, broken pieces. I didn't know him, but he moved like someone who knew me. I pulled my coat tighter around me, though the cold wasn't what made me shiver. The neighborhood was too quiet, wrapped in that faint orange glow from street lamps that always reminded me of old photographs. Soft, distant, slightly unreal. My house sat there, steady and still, its windows reflecting the night back at me. It should have looked familiar. It should have felt like mine. But the sight of him standing on my porch made the whole street feel strange, foreign, in a way that stung deeper than fear. He didn't look around, not at the yard, not at the street, not at the neighboring houses, just my front door. He stood with his shoulders squared, head slightly tilted, holding something in his right hand. It caught the porch light briefly. A metallic glint. Not a weapon, not exactly. But not harmless either. Maybe a tool. Maybe something meant to open a door that didn't belong to him. The light flickered again, as though the house was trying to tell me something, warn me. My breath fogged in the cold air as I leaned forward, careful not to let the car shift or the branches rustle. I didn't want him to hear me. I didn't want him to know he was being watched. He stepped closer to the door, raising his hand as if to knock. But he didn't. Instead, his fingertips grazed the handle lightly, almost respectfully, like someone checking for warmth. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel even though I wasn't moving, my thumb grazing the leather until it creaked beneath me. A simple sound, too loud in the stillness. The man leaned in, placing his ear against the door, listening. For what? My house didn't make noise when empty, not unless the heater kicked on or the fridge rattled or the pipes sighed like old bones. But he didn't seem to be listening for household sounds. He seemed to be listening for someone. He pulled back after a few seconds. That metallic object in his hand shifted, and now I could see it clearly. A narrow, flat tool. Something like a lockpick. Something meant to open without permission. He didn't knock. He didn't try the door like a neighbor might. He prepared like a locksmith, or a thief. Then, with slow calculation, he stepped back. Not in retreat, but like someone re-evaluating a plan. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. He didn't look around before dialing. No nervous glances. No checking to see if anyone could see him. He was confident the street was empty. He was certain my house was his to approach. He lifted the phone to his ear, speaking in a voice so soft it was almost indistinguishable from the hum of the porch light. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched his mouth move, slow and controlled, like someone giving instructions rather than asking for them. The porch light flickered again, harder this time, long enough to illuminate half his face, and that half was enough to unsettle everything inside me. He wasn't someone from the neighborhood, not a delivery driver, not a repairman. His expression was too calm, his posture too rehearsed, his presence too intentional. Like he'd been here before, or like he'd been told exactly what to expect. When he finished speaking, he lowered the phone slowly, still not looking around. His eyes stayed fixed on my door, waiting for something, or someone. And in that moment, I realized something that made my stomach twist. He wasn't acting like he belonged on my porch. He was acting like the house belonged to him. The man slipped the metallic tool back into his pocket and stepped down from the porch, moving with a quiet ease that made my skin prickle. He didn't hurry, didn't hesitate. He simply walked toward the side of the house, disappearing into the shadow where the porch light couldn't reach him. I stayed frozen behind the branches, barely breathing. My house stood there, lit from inside like a hollow lantern, glowing softly, deceptively. The place I had called safe for years now felt like a stranger itself. I whispered into the cold air, almost afraid of the sound of my own voice. Why is he acting like he belongs there? The night didn't answer, but my house. It almost looked like it would. I sat in my car with the engine off, listening to the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. The street had emptied out completely, leaving only the porch lights glowing like lonely fireflies. My house sat at the end of the block, dark around the edges but bright enough inside to look awake. And for the first time in my life, I looked at it the way you look at a stranger, carefully, suspiciously, searching for something I didn't want to find. The night around it seemed to breathe in slow, deliberate pulses, as if the house itself had lungs, as if it knew I was watching. I had never really studied my home before, not like this, not with the kind of attention you give something you're afraid of. My eyes traced every outline, the roof line, the gutters, the porch railing, the single brick near the steps that had chipped last winter, all ordinary things, familiar things, but tonight, familiarity felt like a trick. I noticed the back gate first, slightly open. A small thing, just a sliver of darkness, where there should have been a clean line of wood. I told myself the wind must have nudged it loose, but the night air was still, completely still. Even the leaves weren't moving. Then my eyes drifted higher, up to the second floor, the window to my bedroom. The curtain wasn't how I'd left it, not fully drawn, just pulled to the side, a few inches, enough to look out, or look in. My stomach tightened. I tried to calm my breathing, tried to convince myself I was being dramatic, letting fear paint shadows into shapes, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It sat in my chest like something heavy, something I couldn't swallow, something I couldn't name, so I pulled out my phone and zoomed in. The camera steadied in my hands, or at least I forced it to. The screen brightened the inside of the car, turning my face into a pale reflection floating above the neighborhood. I zoomed farther and farther. The curtain filled the frame, a thin line of fabric hanging too neatly, too deliberately. I adjusted the angle, tilting the phone slightly. That's when I saw it. A shape, tall, human-shaped, standing behind the curtain, not leaning or shifting or moving, just standing. My throat closed. It was almost impossible to tell where the figure ended and the shadows began, but I knew enough to understand it wasn't my imagination. The outline was too sharp, too defined, too tall to be mine, too still to be alive, or maybe too still to be normal. I blinked hard, willing the shape to disappear, but it stayed, unmoving, silent, waiting. I lowered the phone for a moment, rubbing my fingers against my palms to calm the shaking. The night outside seemed to grow colder, pressing against the car windows like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. I raised the phone again. The silhouette hadn't shifted, not even an inch. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I lowered the phone slowly, letting the darkness reclaim the house. For a second, I sat there in total stillness, letting the fear settle into my bones. It wasn't a jolt or a shock. It was quieter than that. An understanding that crawled through me like a slow wave. Someone was inside my bedroom, inside my home, inside a place that held my clothes, my books, my life. I leaned back against the seat, feeling the leather press against my spine. My heart wasn't pounding fast. It was pounding heavy, deep. The kind of heartbeat you get when your body tries to protect you before your mind can catch up. The figure behind the curtain hadn't moved once. Not when I zoomed in, not when the porch lights flickered, not even when I put the phone down. Most people shift their weight, scratch their arm, tilt their head. This figure didn't. It stood there like it had been standing for hours, or like it was meant to be there. That thought hit me harder than anything else. Who waits in someone else's bedroom? Completely still. A cold realization crept up my neck. The kind you don't want. The kind that changes the shape of the night. There was no scenario where this was normal. No explanation that didn't end with the truth I was afraid to admit. Someone was waiting for me. Or watching for me. Or watching something inside my room, and I had no idea what they wanted. I lowered the phone fully, letting it rest on my lap. The house stood there, quiet and patient, as if nothing about it had changed. As if it hadn't just shown me something that would haunt me every time I tried to sleep again. The figure behind the curtain didn't need to move for me to understand what its stillness meant. Stillness can be a message. Stillness can be an invitation. Stillness can be a threat. I watched the dark outline through the glass, unable to look away. The night felt colder, tighter, like it was drawing closer around me. I whispered to no one. Maybe to myself, maybe to the house, maybe to the shadow behind the curtain. Who's in my bedroom, just standing there? The darkness didn't answer, but it felt like it almost wanted to. The night had settled thick around me, the way fog settles over a field, slowly, quietly until you don't notice you're surrounded. I sat in my parked car with the lights off, watching my house from a safe distance, if a distance could really be safe. Then my phone vibrated, just once. A small, sharp tremor against my leg. The screen lit up the inside of the car with a pale glow. Unknown number. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing, thin, uneven, and when I answered, I didn't speak. I just listened. Sometimes silence tells the truth first. I pressed the phone to my ear, waiting for someone else to break the quiet. The neighborhood around me felt frozen. Houses asleep, curtains pulled, every porch light dimmed into soft yellow halos. There was something unsettling about being the only person awake on a street that felt like it had retreated into itself. A faint static buzz filled the line. Not loud, not harsh. Just enough to make the hair on my neck lift. Then a voice, low, distorted, as if run through a broken speaker or swallowed by distance. "You weren't supposed to see him." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the phone until my joints ached. The voice continued, quieter this time, but with a strange urgency. "Go somewhere crowded." 2 seconds later, the call ended. Just like that. The quiet rushed back into the car, thicker and heavier than before. I sat there staring at my phone screen, the words still echoing inside me. You weren't supposed to see him. My house seemed farther away now, and darker, as if it had swallowed the last of the streetlight on purpose. I tried to breathe normally, but my lungs didn't seem interested in cooperating. The cold from the car window seeped into my skin. I wiped the fog off the glass with the edge of my sleeve, staring at my home. The bedroom window still slightly open, the curtain still drawn just wrong, the darkness inside too settled to be empty. I dialed the number back with shaking fingers. 1 ring, then an error message. The kind that doesn't sound like a real one. Clipped, generic, as if it had been generated to hide something rather than explain it. I stared at the phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Could it have been the doctor? His voice earlier had been soft but human, trembling, desperate. This voice felt almost mechanical, like someone was disguising themselves, or maybe like someone was being forced to speak through a filter. I replayed the words again in my mind. You weren't supposed to see him. The stranger on my porch, the one with the metal tool, the one who moved like he owned my house. I shivered. The kind of shiver that starts deep in your stomach and climbs upward until your shoulders tense. I looked back at my house. The shadows in the windows didn't move, didn't flicker, didn't even breathe. The fear wasn't sharp. It wasn't the kind you feel when something jumps out at you. It was slower, heavier. something that settled in layers, like wet sand building around your ankles. Why warn me? Why twice? The doctor's whispered note. Now this voice, different tones, same urgency. I tried to make sense of it. Was someone watching me? Had someone followed me from the clinic? Had I walked into something without knowing? I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, letting the cold leather ground me. My eyes stung. Not from tears, but from the weight of not knowing what was happening to my own life. Go somewhere crowded, the voice had said. But when I looked around, there was no one, no people, no movement, not a single open window, just me, my car, and a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. The stillness of that house unnerved me the most. It sat there, dark except for that one lamp inside, waiting, as if someone or something inside was listening for my next move. My fingers tightened around the phone again. It felt too light, too small to save me from anything. I didn't know who called, but I knew one thing. Someone didn't just want me gone. Someone wanted me far away. I leaned back in the seat and let out a slow breath, the kind that feels like surrender more than relief. My phone lay face up in my lap, the unknown number still bright on the screen like a wound that hadn't closed. Outside, the night pressed against the car, quiet and expectant. My house watched from the distance, its windows blank, its shadows too still to be innocent. "Why warn me twice?" I whispered, though the car swallowed the sound. The cold crawled deeper into me, sharp and deliberate. I didn't have answers, only warnings, only fear. And as I stared at the place I used to call home, I felt something new settle inside me. Something darker, something certain. Whoever had called, they weren't trying to scare me, they were trying to save me. The clinic looked different at night, hollow, as if the building itself had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe again. Only the outline of its roof was visible against the dark sky, the windows pitch black and the sign above the entrance unlit, like someone had pulled the plug on the whole place. I pulled into the empty parking lot, my headlights sweeping across the glass doors before cutting off, plunging everything back into quiet. I sat there for a moment, holding the steering wheel as if the leather might comfort me. It didn't. Fear has a way of making everything feel unfamiliar, even places you walked through just hours earlier. But I needed answers, and this was the only place left to look. I stepped out of the car, closing the door softly, though I didn't know who I was trying not to disturb. The air felt colder here, as if the night had settled differently around the clinic. It clung to my skin, to my clothes, to the space between breaths. The walkway to the entrance was dim, lit only by a weak street lamp flickering in and out. My footsteps sounded too loud against the concrete, dry, echoing taps that bounced off the glass. I hesitated at the door, peering inside. Everything was dark. Not closed for the night, dark, darker, like the kind of dark meant to hide something. I raised my hand and knocked lightly, expecting the sound to vanish into nothing. Instead, it echoed, long, hollow, unsettling. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I stepped back, ready to give up when I heard it. A faint shuffling from deep inside, a sound so soft I questioned whether I had imagined it. But then came another, and another. Someone was inside. Someone was moving. I pressed my palm to the cold glass. "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice felt thin, almost swallowed by the dark. And then, a soft click of a lock turning. The door cracked open just an inch. A sliver of dim hallway light spilled out, and a face appeared. Tired, older, with eyes that looked like they hadn't rested in weeks. The janitor. I recognized him vaguely. I didn't know his name, but I remembered his slow, gentle sweeping in the halls. He always nodded politely when we passed each other. Tonight, he didn't nod. He looked frightened. "Mara," he whispered, not opening the door any farther. His voice trembled like he was afraid the walls might hear him. You shouldn't be here." "I need to see Dr. Hale," I said softly. At the sound of the doctor's name, his eyes darted down the hallway, then back at me. He opened the door just enough to pull me inside, locking it behind us with hurried fingers. "He's not here," he said. "He left in a rush, a real rush." "I know. They told me." I swallowed. "Did he say anything before he left?" The janitor hesitated. His gaze traveled past me toward the darkness outside, then back to the hallway again, like he was afraid something might emerge from either direction. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, voice barely a breath now. "If they followed you—" "Who?" I asked. My voice cracked around the word. His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin key card, pressing it into my hand quickly, like it burned him. "He left something for you." My fingers closed around the card. The plastic was warm from his hand, or maybe warm from fear. I couldn't tell. "What did he leave?" I asked quietly. The janitor didn't meet my eyes. "He said you'd know where. To find it." I didn't know. Not really. But the idea of Dr. Hale anticipating this moment, anticipating that I'd come back, made my stomach ache in a way I couldn't explain. I opened my mouth to ask more, but before I could speak, a sound snapped through the hallway. Footsteps, slow at first and then slightly quicker, a steady rhythm echoing off the tile, moving toward us from somewhere deeper inside the clinic. The janitor's face went pale. He stepped back, pressing his fingers to his lips in a desperate plea for silence. "Go," he mouthed. "Now." "But—" He shook his head sharply, eyes wide. The footsteps grew louder, closer, too deliberate to be someone leaving for the night. I tucked the card into my coat pocket, my heart thudding so hard the fabric seemed to move with each beat. The janitor unlocked the door just enough to push me outside. "Mara," he whispered, "don't let them see you." Before I could ask who they were, the door shut, locked. The sound of metal falling into place rang louder than it should have. I stepped back into the night, the cold feeling different now, sharper, like a warning I'd been too slow to hear. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, the keycard pressed between my fingers like a lifeline I didn't understand. Behind the glass doors, the faint hallway light flickered once, then disappeared completely. The clinic went dark again, as if whoever was walking toward us had turned out the lights on purpose. The janitor's final words echoed in my mind, soft but soaked in fear. "He left something for you." What could a doctor leave that required secrecy? What could be so dangerous that even saying the wrong thing made a grown man tremble? I looked down at the key card, its edges catching the moonlight. Whatever it opened, it wasn't meant for anyone else, and somehow that felt like betrayal. The door to the back office creaked open like it remembered me, or maybe it warned me. A thin strip of fluorescent light flickered overhead, washing the room in that pale blue tint that makes everything look colder than it should. Dust floated through the air, catching the light like slow-falling snow. And there, on the metal desk in the center of the room, lay a single manila folder. My name was written on it in thick black marker, not printed, not typed, handwritten, bold, sharp, urgent. I took one step toward it, then another. Somehow, I already knew nothing inside it would feel like mine. I closed the office door quietly behind me, though the silence in the room made even that soft click echo too loudly. The janitor had slipped me the key card with trembling hands, whispering that the doctor had left something for me. I didn't know what to expect. A note, maybe, a warning, but not this. The air felt heavier as I approached the desk. My reflection wavered in the dark computer screen, pale and drawn, as if the room had drained color from me, on purpose. I reached out and touched the folder lightly. The cardboard felt warm, strangely warm, like someone had been holding it only minutes before. My fingers shook as I opened it. The first page was a form I recognized. Clinic intake paperwork. But something was wrong. My signature. Except, it wasn't mine. The loops were too neat, the slant too perfect. I flipped to the next page. Lab results for tests I'd never requested. Blood work I never authorized. A scan I never took. The pages felt thick, too real, too official. It was like looking into a version of my life that belonged to someone else, someone who had taken my place without permission. Then a new page stopped me cold. My address. And beneath it, the date of tonight, circled in red ink. My breath stumbled out of me in a small, shaky exhale. I touched the circle lightly, the ink slightly smudged at one edge like someone had pressed too hard, maybe in frustration, or urgency, or fear. I flipped to the next sheet, the paper trembling between my fingertips. A photograph slid out and landed on the desk. I froze. It was a picture of me, but it wasn't taken outside, not from a doorbell camera, not from the street, not from a window. It was taken from inside my hallway. The angle was unmistakable. The top of the bookshelf, the frame of the coat closet, the rug I'd nearly tripped on that morning. And there I was, walking through my front door, unaware, arms full of groceries, hair pulled back, looking ordinary. I felt something twist deep inside me. Someone had been inside my home, standing exactly where this photo had been taken. I picked it up with both hands, my thumbs pressing into the glossy surface. The edges were curled slightly, handled often maybe, or handled recently. My pulse beat against my throat like a warning. I glanced around the office even though I knew no one else was there. The quiet felt heavier now, pressing against my shoulders like a weight I couldn't shrug off. I forced myself to look back at the desk. Another page waited beneath the photo. The final sheet wasn't medical, wasn't administrative, wasn't anything I could explain. It was a single typed sentence centered on the page. If she goes home, activate protocol. The words might as well have been written in fire. My vision narrowed around them, the letters growing sharper with each breath I took. Activate protocol. Protocol for what? For whom? For me. I read it again and again. Each time the sentence felt heavier, as though understanding it required giving something up. Safety, certainty, the illusion that my life had belonged to me until now. My legs softened beneath me. I sank into the office chair without meaning to, the metal frame creaking under my weight. I held the edge of the desk to steady myself. My fingers brushed against the camera still in my coat pocket, the same pocket that held the doctor's warning, the janitor's key card, the unanswered questions piling faster than I could process. Someone had planned something. For tonight. For me. My throat felt tight, my breath uneven. I pressed a hand over my mouth and forced myself to think. Who wrote this? Who knew I was coming home tonight? And what did protocol mean? Every possibility felt worse than the last. I gathered the pages with unsteady hands, the photo slipping slightly as I placed everything back in the folder. My name on the cover felt different now, heavier, almost mocking. I stood slowly, the office chair scraping softly against the floor like a quiet protest. The fluorescent light above flickered twice, then steadied, casting long shadows across the desk. Holding the folder against my chest, I stared at the final page one more time. If she goes home, activate protocol. A thin shiver moved through me. Whatever the doctor had uncovered, whatever he'd wanted to warn me about, it wasn't just dangerous, it was intentional. I stepped toward the door, whispering to the empty room, what protocol could possibly involve me? The silence that answered felt almost alive. I reached my neighborhood on foot, keeping to the darker edges of the sidewalk, where streetlights flickered or didn't reach at all. The night felt colder here, heavier, as if the air itself was trying to warn me away. My house sat near the end of the street, still and dark except for one faint line of light near the ground. The basement. A place I had barely thought about in years. I crouched behind my back fence, breath tucked tight inside my chest. Then I saw him, the same man from my porch, moving toward the basement door with a confidence that wasn't his to have. And when he opened it from the outside, something inside me broke. I pressed myself against the cold wood of the fence, the rough grain digging into my palms. My house looked familiar from this angle, the way it did on summer afternoons when I tended the garden. But tonight it looked different, like it had been hollowed out, emptied, or repurposed for something I couldn't yet understand. The man didn't hesitate as he reached the basement door. He didn't fumble or search for a hidden key. He simply clicked something into the lock, a small metallic tool, and twisted. The lock surrendered with a soft snap. My heart lurched. I didn't even know that door could be opened from the outside. I'd never once tried. It had always been just a door that led to dusty shelves, old paint cans, and whatever memories I wasn't ready to throw away. But he knew. He knew exactly how to get in. The door swung open without a creak. The man slipped inside, the glow of dim light catching the edge of his coat before the door thudded quietly shut behind him. I knelt lower, fingers numb from cold and something sharper. Fear, maybe, or the realization that nothing in my life had been as simple or private as I'd always believed. From somewhere beneath, the ground of faint humming began, a mechanical sound, rhythmic, growing. The sound rose like something waking up, low even, unsettling in its steadiness. Not the heater, not the old boiler, not anything my house had ever produced before. I held my breath and tilted my head, trying to locate it. The humming pulsed in vibrations I could almost feel through the dirt. Then another sound layered over it, a soft series of clicks, like machinery calibrating itself. My stomach tightened. Someone was doing something in my basement. I edged along the fence until I found a gap between two planks, just wide enough to see a sliver of the basement window. The glass was fogged from the inside, but faint shadows moved, shapes of men, their silhouettes elongated by the underground lighting. Then I heard them. Voices. Two. Both male. Both calm in a way that made my skin crawl. Timing has to be precise. Containment first, then extraction. No mistakes tonight. Their words thudded softly through the ground, muffled but unmistakable. I leaned closer, heart pounding in uneven beats. One shadow passed near the window, tall and straight-backed. Then came another phrase, clearer than the others. Once the target returns. I froze. Target. The word hung in the night air like a blade, sharp enough to slice through every last shred of denial I had left. Target. Me. My breath came out uneven, fogging the fence slats in front of me. I pressed my fingers into the dirt, grounding myself before the dizziness could take over. They were talking about me. Not the house. Not the neighborhood. Me. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt too dry. I strained to hear more. Ready as soon as she steps inside. Protocol triggered automatically. No deviation this time. Each sentence built on the last, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I wasn't just being watched. I wasn't just in danger. Someone had planned something for me. Something precise. Something mechanical. Something that needed containment. A fresh wave of humming filled the basement, louder now, almost buzzing through the yard. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, like equipment powering up, like a machine waiting for a cue. I closed my eyes for 1 second, one small second. How long had this been happening? How long had they been inside my home? How long had I been living above this? A faint metallic clatter from inside jolted my eyes open. The men's shadows shifted again. The door clicked softly, like someone checking it twice. I backed up from the fence, slow and silent, my hands shaking. I didn't know where I would go, only that I couldn't stay here, and I couldn't go home. I crouched low in the grass, watching the sliver of light beneath my basement door pulse like a warning heartbeat. The mechanical hum rose once more, steady and deliberate, as if the house itself was preparing for something tied to me in a way I didn't understand. Target. The word echoed inside me, cold and certain. Why me? What had I stepped into? What had the doctor found that made him press that note into my hand with trembling fingers? The night pressed in around me, still and listening. I backed away from the fence, each movement slow, cautious, as though the ground might betray me. Whatever they were preparing for, I couldn't let it happen. And for the first time, I whispered the truth out loud. Why would anyone consider me a target? I didn't hear his footsteps. I only felt the shift in the air, the way the night seemed to draw one long, uneasy breath and hold it. I looked up from the park bench where I'd been hiding, half shadowed under a dying street lamp, and there he was. The doctor, stepping out from the dark like a man pulled from the wrong world. His clothes were wrinkled, stained with sweat. His tie hung crooked, and his hair clung damp to his forehead. He looked like someone who hadn't stopped running since the moment he handed me that note. For the first time all night, fear had a face. He slowed as he approached, hands raised slightly, not in surrender, but in something quieter, something like apology. The dim park lights caught the sharp lines of exhaustion on his face. Shadows clung under his eyes, hollowing them out. He wasn't the calm physician I'd seen earlier that day. He was unraveling. "Mara," he whispered, like saying my name hurt. "Thank God you didn't go home." I couldn't speak at first. My voice felt buried under the weight of everything I'd seen. The silhouette in my bedroom window, the man entering my house through the basement, the humming machines meant for me, or for something tied to me. The doctor glanced over his shoulder, checking the darkness behind him. When he finally sat beside me, the bench groaned under our combined weight, as though aware of something fragile settling on it. "Your house," he started, then stopped. His hands trembled, fingers opening and closing in restless motions. "It was compromised months ago." The words didn't fit together at first. Months ago. Not tonight. Not today. Months. He lowered his gaze to the pavement like he didn't want to see my reaction. The only sound around us was the faint rustle of leaves and the distant buzz of a street lamp about to die. I felt the world tilt slightly. "Compromised how?" I finally managed. My voice sounded thin, too light for the question it carried. He swallowed hard. "Someone accessed your biometric records." I blinked slowly, waiting for him to correct himself, to add context that made sense. But he just kept going, his voice trembling around each word. "Your fingerprints, your retinal scans, even a vocal imprint, all linked to your medical file." The breath left my chest in one long, shaky stream. He rubbed his palms against his knees, as if trying to scrub off whatever guilt clung to them. I didn't notice at first. The system flagged changes, but I thought it was an error. By the time I looked deeper, he broke off, pressing a hand against his forehead. It was already done. They had already taken what they needed. I stared at him, struggling to understand. But why? Why my records? He shook his head. "Because they needed access to things only your identity could open. Restricted facilities, secure testing labs, storage units tied to government studies." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his eyes were wet, terrified. "You didn't authorize any of it, but you enabled it." My stomach twisted so sharply I had to grip the edge of the bench to stay grounded. The idea that someone had used me, my body, my identity, to unlock doors I didn't know existed made my skin cold. I whispered, "They're in my house, using my basement, using something. Why?" His jaw tightened. "Because of what's connected to you." The word connected hit me like stepping into a cold room. It wasn't specific. It wasn't comforting. It was the kind of word doctors use when they don't know how much truth a person can survive in one sitting. I turned to him. Connected to me how? What does that mean? He looked down at his hands, at the way they shook. When he finally lifted his face, he didn't try to hide the fear there. I think someone close to you, someone tied to your records, was part of something classified, something that went missing. My heartbeat stumbled. Someone close to me? My parents? I whispered. He didn't answer. Friends? My brother? He shook his head slowly. Mara, this isn't about relationships. It's about lineage. He met my eyes, voice soft, almost breaking. Someone in your family tree was part of an old project, a genetic study discontinued decades ago, but the access permissions tied to those subjects still exist in old systems. Your biometric data triggered those permissions automatically. My thoughts tangled into a knot I couldn't loosen. I had never heard of anything like this. No one in my family ever mentioned anything strange. No secret programs, no government involvement, no legacy of whatever this was. And the men in your house, he added quietly, aren't after you. They're after whatever your identity can unlock next. My breath stalled. I wasn't the threat. I was the key. The doctor stood slowly, scanning the park again. The wind brushed through the trees, carrying the faint hiss of leaves scraping against each other. The night felt tighter around us now, as if listening. I rose too, legs unsteady, heart thudding in slow, uneven beats. What connection, I whispered, could be dangerous enough to make strangers invade my home? He looked at me, truly looked. And something in his expression changed. A quiet grief, an apology he couldn't speak, aloud. That, he murmured, is what they're willing to kill for. The wind lifted my hair slightly, cool against my neck, and for the first time, the darkness around me didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. We stood far enough away that the house looked almost like a photograph, still, framed by the night, untouched by the chaos I now knew lived beneath it. The doctor didn't speak at first. He just watched the place where my life used to feel safe, hands on his knees, breathing hard from the run that had brought him to me. A faint wind moved through the trees, brushing cold leaves against my coat. Across the yard, the basement windows suddenly glowed with a cold, bluish light, the kind that makes your stomach twist even before you understand why. Then the generator kicked on, and the house woke up. We crouched behind a neighbor's fence, splintered wood pressing into my palms. The doctor kept his eyes locked on the basement, shoulders tense, jaw set in a way I hadn't seen on him before. Not even in his panic at the clinic, not even when he found me in the park like a man scared of his own shadow. That sound, he murmured, barely moving his lips. They're powering it up. The hum deepened, vibrating through the ground beneath my shoes. The windows flushed with an icy glow that didn't belong in any home. Something sterile, industrial, wrong. My house had never looked less like mine. A shape rolled into view behind the glass. At first I thought it was a person strapped to a gurney, but the outline was too angular, too rigid, like something built, not born, something with cables instead of veins. A metallic arm glinted under the blue light, then a second one. My breath rose shallow in my chest. What is that? He didn't answer right away. His Adam's apple bobbed once, a hard swallow. You weren't supposed to see this, not tonight, not ever. The night pressed in around us, heavy and listening. I waited for him to explain. Part of me already wished he wouldn't. It's an experimental medical device, he said finally. Each word exhaled like something brittle. Encrypted, classified, and it went missing months ago. The hum from the basement pulsed through my ribs, steady and merciless. He kept going. Your biometric signature was used to authorize its transfer. Your identity became the key that unlocked it from storage. Whoever stole it needed you. The world felt thin for a moment, like the air couldn't hold its shape. I stared at my house, my porch, my curtains, the windows I cleaned on weekends, and none of it looked real anymore. "I didn't sign anything," I whispered. "I know," he said. "Your records were altered. Someone exploited the permissions tied to your chart. They forged access you didn't know you had." The shape behind the basement window shifted again, mechanical joints unfolding like they'd been asleep. A faint robotic whir drifted upward, too smooth, too intentional. "So they hid it," the doctor continued, "in your basement, the last place anyone would look." He rubbed his shaking hands together as if they were cold, though sweat glistened along his hairline. "They used your identity to make it untraceable." Behind the glass, one of the men stepped into view, calm, controlled, wearing gloves that caught the blue light. He reached for the machine like someone greeting an old friend. I felt myself pull back an inch, as if distance could protect me from a truth already in motion. "They're extracting it now," the doctor said, voice cracking, "moving it before the breach is discovered." I turned to him. "Breach?" He nodded once, a short, tight motion. "The moment you found the folder, the moment you didn't go home, that disrupted their timeline." My house buzzed like a nerve ending. The generator groaning, the machine shifting, men moving in silent synchronization. They weren't panicked. They weren't improvising. They were executing a plan that had required me, my body, my records, my life. I felt something inside me tilt, the slow slide of understanding giving way to a quiet, devastating truth. None of this had started tonight. It had only surfaced. The doctor rubbed his temples. "I thought I caught it early enough," he murmured. "I thought shutting down the access logs would delay them, but they were already ahead, already inside." I looked down at my hands, the hands that had unlocked doors with fingerprints I never questioned, signed forms I thought were harmless, touched doorknobs and screens without knowing they were being copied, mapped, used. Behind the fence, a new sound rose from my basement, a hiss, then a click, then the mechanical shift of something being disengaged. "They're almost done," he whispered. "Almost done with what? With stealing? With erasing evidence? With framing me? Or with something worse?" The basement lights flickered, sharp and frantic. Then everything snapped dark. The sudden silence was suffocating, as though the night itself held its breath. The bluish glow vanished, swallowed whole, leaving my house a blackened silhouette against the sky. The doctor and I froze, him gripping the fence rail, me clutching the cold grass beneath my knees. Somewhere inside that darkness, men moved with purpose. Maybe with the stolen machine, maybe toward the exit, maybe toward me. My throat tightened. The world I'd known, the quiet routines, the safe walls, the simple days, had been only the surface of something deeper, something waiting. I stared at the house where every memory lived and whispered the only question I had left. What happens now?